Hey all, it's Tony Volpicello, and this is the Career Jigsaw Podcast. Welcome or welcome back. So, I've had the luxury of putting my guests on the hot seat when I've had interviews while I sit back and do most of the easy stuff. So I thought, why not have the questions fired my way? I've also had it easy because I'm able to prepare and script in advance an episode or an interview. So this episode will not be that. And I have no idea in advance if this will require a ton of editing, and my goal is to not edit much. But I thought it would be interesting, maybe more for me than for you, to be interviewed rather than be the interviewer. Because I know you all get to hear me talk a lot, but what I think might be helpful for me is experiencing it from the other side of the microphone to help me become a better interviewer. So I'm turning the tables today. I will be the guest, and we've got a special host for today. But before we dive in, one quick note. Please stay tuned to the end of the episode for a special surprise. So with that, let's get started.
Welcome to the Career Jigsaw. I'm your host for today, Alex Thompson. Tony, why don't you kick things off by introducing yourself to our listeners?
Oh, thank you, Alex. I appreciate that. It's funny being on the other side of this. Hey, as you all know, my name is Tony Volpicello. I'm the host of this podcast normally, maybe not today. Before I started this podcast, I worked in banking for over 35 years. The entire time of that, mostly with Bank of America. I live in Holbrook, New York, which is on Long Island. I have a beautiful wife who I've been married to for 30 years, going on 31, and two absolutely fantastic kids, Alex and Rachel, who are out of school, out on their own with their own jobs, doing incredibly well, and I could not be more proud of them. I'm an avid golfer, and as I have mentioned many times, hopefully not bragging, I am retired and a part-time podcaster now who is literally just trying to enjoy every moment.
Tony, it's great to have you here. To kick things off, what inspired you to start the Career Jigsaw after such a long and distinguished career in banking?
Well, honestly, my desire was to give back. When I looked back at my career, where I began, which was fairly humble beginnings, entry-level part-time teller, to where I was able to retire a bit on the early side, was able to put my kids through college, have a house that's paid for, vacation home, etc. I felt incredibly lucky, and my desire was to pay that back somehow. So I thought originally I might write something down, put together a guide or something that I could give to others to help them either with their resume or interviewing skills or working with their coworkers or their managers day to day. And then I had this thought about a podcast. I didn't really think deeply about it, but a few friends had also mentioned, hey, why don't you think about a podcast? You deliver a message pretty strong verbally. People are motivated when you speak. Maybe a podcast is a way to go. So I kind of switched into research mode, looked at everything possible on what it took to create a podcast. I do zero about podcasts. I was an avid podcast listener, loved true crime, but had no idea what it took to create one, to publish one, to market one. But that all snowballed into almost a year to this day, me getting a podcast up and running.
Can you share what initially drew you to a career in banking?
Well, sometimes careers happen by accident, and this is definitely an example of one of those times. I was working in retail, managed a liquor store, worked in restaurants, had crazy hours, unpredictable pay, and really just decided at a pretty early age I wanted what I called in my head a real job. I knew a few people in banking, so I applied for an entry-level teller position knowing this was 9 to 5, predictable pay, maybe a way for me to move up. And I got a few offers and honestly took the offer that paid the most at the time, which was pretty close to minimum wage at that time, 40 years ago, a 20-hour teller position. And I look back and thankfully the rest is history.
So from starting with a part-time role, how did you navigate your way up in the banking industry? And what were some of the key milestones in your career journey?
Well, first looking back, if I was to begin by giving advice, I would say maybe don't do what I did, which was just put my head down and try to do a great job. I will say, of course, it worked out, but I think being more mindful of your career path would probably allow for more opportunities. But at the time, I was so focused on just do a good job, just do a good job. And I was lucky. I worked for some great people who saw something in me, took a chance on me. So that's really how my career went from part-time teller to obviously full-time, then to other positions within a bank branch, and then eventually leading my own branch before moving on to larger roles with larger territories, multiple branches, and then into staff positions where I was able to see entire divisions.
How has the banking industry changed since you started? And what skills do you think are most important for success today?
Yeah, the change over the 40 years has been significant, actually mind-blowing, to be quite honest. I mean, the first 10 or 15, 20 years was pretty much uneventful outside of a few financial fiascos, both in the US and abroad. But after that, the shift from everything being so manually done to digitally things being done, the changes were incredible. And to look at what a bank branch was then versus what it is now, I think is the biggest transformation. Back then, it was all about transactions. The bulk of what happened in a branch was people walking in to transact something over the teller line and maybe go over to the desk, to the platform area, as we called it, to open up a new account. It was always very unpredictable, very chaotic, and very transaction oriented. I view it like an emergency room, like an ER. It was just, you didn't know what was walking in the door every day, and most of the time it was crazy. Fast forward to today, and those ERs of bank branches have become doctor's offices. There's not a lot of transactions. There's still some, but nowhere near the volume. I mean, it's down, I would say it's down 90% from what it was. And now it's a doctor's office where it's more about getting good advice and guidance and staying financially healthy by sitting down with someone and helping them map out what are your short and long-term goals and how can we meet them.
That comparison between bank branches and emergency rooms versus doctor's offices really paints a vivid picture of how the industry has shifted. The move from a transaction-heavy environment to one focused on advice and long-term financial planning shows just how much the role of banks and bankers has evolved. It's clear that adaptability is key, and the ability to guide people through financial goals is now at the forefront.
In terms of skills needed, to follow up on the second half of your question, there are two that I think come to mind. First is being very customer focused. And I know every business strives to be that, so let me explain for a bit. I think in banking, I mentioned this evolution to advice and guidance. Well, you've got to be really focused on your client, especially in the financial industry, if you're going to do that well and do it where the client appreciates it. So being able to ask really thoughtful, engaging questions to uncover what's on the mind of that client. Much like a doctor would ask you, where does it hurt? And then you take the temperature and pulse, etc., to get a good understanding as to where I, as a doctor, can help you. Is where I see, I know I'm using this medical analogy again, but where I see the skills necessary for a banker today. So really understanding your client and not selling them a damn thing. And I know that might fly in the face of what some banks out there think they're trying to do, but I've never thought that the word sales should be in banking because I think it implies I'm trying to convince you to buy something that I think you need, or maybe I need more than you do because I have goals, rather than I'm making some strong recommendations because I've had a chance to ask you some great questions. I've listened really well, and I've prioritized what I think is most important to you. So that requires a whole different level of client focus. And then the second piece to that is, as an employee, being coachable. Because as much as you might think you do that well, there's always an opportunity to do it better. or there's an opportunity to be a better teammate, or if you're a leader, to be more effective. So being able to be coachable, listen to some constructive feedback, take it for what it is, and then act on it. It's probably true in most industries, but I think it's very true in banking today.
How did you find the transition from a structured corporate environment to the more creative and flexible world of podcasting?
Yeah, I think creative is the key. I had a bit of creativity in my job that I could apply, but this took it to a whole new level without any restraints of regulations, rules, etc. So that was kind of the fun part. But this also felt a bit like the rigor of work, which also felt good for me. I missed a little bit of what I did before. Trust me, I am very grateful to be retired, but to be able to take some of those old muscles and stretch them again, and to be able to exercise parts of my brain that I wasn't exercising that first year or so retiring, it was a lot of fun. So the transition wasn't that hard, and then having things scheduled like I would in my old job day to day and having a podcast schedule was very familiar to me. So it actually was a bit of an easier transition than I thought. I think the harder work was, all right, what does this podcast contain? I know I wanted to be career advice motivated, but who exactly should be on the podcast? What guests should we have on? What topics should we bring to the table? How long should a podcast be? When should you publish it? Were all things to consider, but honestly, the transition was kind of in my wheelhouse and a bit on the easier side.
That's great to hear. It's interesting how your background gave you a solid foundation for this new venture. Now, you've interviewed a lot of fascinating guests on the Career Jigsaw. Has there been a particular story or piece of advice from a guest that really stuck with you or changed your perspective?
Yeah, I wouldn't say there was one particular, but I would say there was a particular theme that continued to crop up with all of my guests. So we did industry deep dives where we talked to guests about their industry and their career path. And what came out every single time was passion for what they were doing, really kind of a love for the work they were doing. Doesn't mean they were all in their dream job, but they figured out a way to love what they were doing, even if they didn't do what they loved, if that makes any sense. So the passion to just day to day find something in their job that motivated them. I was surprised. I didn't expect that, but it came out with every single guest.
That's a powerful insight. Finding passion in what you do, even if it's not your dream job, can make a huge difference. Shifting gears a bit, how has your family reacted to your podcasting journey? Have they been involved or offered any advice along the way?
Yes and yes. They've been very supportive, very encouraging, which for a podcaster, especially a first-time podcaster, is incredibly important. Because you don't know if this thing makes any sense. You don't know all the things you should know about creating one of these things. You certainly don't know if the audience is going to like it. So their support went a really long way, both for friends and family, but my family particularly. And yes, they have been involved. I've had multiple family members as guests on episodes to talk about their career path and their industry and to give whatever advice they could to the audience. So yeah, the family has been absolutely outstanding.
That's wonderful to hear. Having that support system must be invaluable, especially during the early stages. Speaking of your audience, what kind of feedback have you received from listeners, and how has it shaped the direction of your podcast?
Yeah, the feedback has been great. I would say the amount of feedback I get is still a work in progress. And I know myself as a podcast listener, I don't give a lot of feedback. I don't rate things. I don't put comments in. And that probably is an opportunity to help the podcaster. But the feedback I have received has all been very positive. It's been things like incredibly helpful. People have told other people. I do see some LinkedIn messages when I announce a podcast episode that supports it. So the overall, although it hasn't been a lot of feedback, the feedback I have gotten has been great. I think the opportunity for me is to figure out ways to get more feedback. But to your other part of the question of shaping it, when I do get feedback, I do listen. And I really think about how to apply it if I can. Now, the tricky thing is, everyone around you, friends and family, all have suggestions. And as a podcast host, you have to filter it a bit. You can't think about every suggestion is a good one or every suggestion is one you want to do. It doesn't mean you want to ignore it, but you do have to think about whether or not it fits what you want to do, because ultimately the buck kind of stops with you, and you are the creative outlet for this and the host. So feedback is great. It's important. But I think also you have to understand and commit to yourself. It doesn't mean you're going to act on it, because I will tell you, everybody that I know that I've asked for feedback or haven't asked for feedback has an opinion.
That makes a lot of sense. Balancing feedback while staying true to your vision is definitely a fine line. On a more personal note, how do you manage your time between podcasting, family, and enjoying your well-deserved retirement?
Yeah, that's actually probably the easiest part, because for the podcast, it's flexible. I do create my own schedule and I commit it to myself. No one really knows what my schedule is. And there's flexibility as to when I decide I want to create a new season. But then once I do that, I do commit to a weekly cadence for episodes for 8, 9, 10 weeks, whatever the case may be. So that part's easy. There's a ton of flexibility. Same thing with family. My kids are both grown on their own. I see them now more than I think I saw them when I was working and they were in school. So that allows for just a whole other piece of enjoyment for my life. So personally and professionally, podcast and work life, and personal life, there really isn't the striving for balance that others might have to with work, because I'm retired. So time is no longer my enemy. Time is my friend.
That sounds like a fantastic way to enjoy this chapter of your life. It's great that you have that flexibility. Looking ahead, what are your future plans for the Career Jigsaw? Are there any new directions or projects you're excited to explore?
Yeah, that's still a work in progress. This episode wraps up season 3. I definitely plan on a season 4. And what worked well in seasons 2 and 3 were having guests on. So I think I will continue that. But I think I will strike a balance of meaningful topics without guests as well as guests, because I've tried guest-heavy seasons and guest-light seasons, and I think a balance of both will work for season 4. So it's a work in progress. I'm not sure yet what themes there may be in season 4. I learned a lot in season 3 with my guests, so more to come.
It sounds like you're always evolving and adapting, which is fantastic. With all the experience you've gained, what advice would you give to someone who's considering starting their own podcast or diving into a new creative project?
Yeah, I can speak to podcasting particularly. And if you are thinking about it and you've got something you want to get out there and something you want to say, go for it. And a couple things I would think about along the way. First, if you are trying to make this a financial career, lower your expectations. And I haven't tried to do that. So I don't have experience with it because I haven't tried to monetize this podcast. But there are roughly 3.5 to 4 million podcasts available out there. So there's a ton of content. So depending on your topic, it may or may not be for the masses. So lowering your expectations as to how many listeners you're going to get up front and not obsess over it is definitely key. And then the other piece of advice I would give on the creation of a podcast is you're going to strive for perfection. And when you record whatever it is you record and you start to play it back and edit it, you're going to be your own worst enemy, because you're not going to like the sound of your own voice. You're going to pick up a lot of mistakes that you didn't think you had while you were recording it. And it's great to have a level of quality you want to achieve so the podcast sounds professional and sounds the way you want it to sound. But at some point, you have to kind of commit to, all right, this is as good as it's going to get for the time I put into it. Because you shouldn't be putting days and weeks into one episode. At some point, you have to just Get the podcast out and then work on what you learned from the episode 1 and apply it to episode 2.
That's fantastic advice. Striving for quality but not letting perfection hold you back is key. What's one piece of career advice that you think is timeless and would benefit anyone, no matter what field they're in?
That's a great question. I think what comes to mind for me is, and this is old advice that I think still works pretty well, no one is going to advocate for you more than you. Doesn't mean you're not going to have some great people around you, your boss, coworkers, who are part of your career and help you along the way. But if you blindly depend on that as a way to get ahead, and you don't think about what are the other things in my control that I can do to open up doors, then you're not doing everything you can, and you're probably being a bit naive. So yes, performance goes a long way. But if you are quietly an outstanding performer and no one notices, and you haven't figured out a way to make sure that it's known, you're not doing everything you can. If you don't have a mentor in your life who is honest and gives you some great constructive feedback, you're not doing everything you can to move ahead. If you're not developing a strong network, so your next boss is someone that you've met at a meeting or a cocktail party who knows you well, so when they interview you, they already know you a bit and know what you can do. Again, you're not opening as many doors as you can. So I would say, to sum that up, you own your career more than anyone else, and you have to take that seriously, and you have to do more than just do your job well.
That's timeless advice indeed. Taking ownership of your career and being proactive can truly set you apart. Now, thinking about the future, what are some goals or projects you're looking forward to, either personally or with your podcast?
That's a great question. So I think personally, I continue to want to be a better human being. I know that sounds kind of corny, aspirational, fill in the blank, whatever the case may be. But, when you're in the work environment, you're so focused on the day-to-day and maybe not of life around you. So spending more time with my wife, spending more time with my kids, who are full grown, but still I want to get back some time that I lost, has been my number one focus. Number 2 has been a little bit of this podcast. It's been a fun journey so far, 3 seasons, 27 episodes, a bunch of 2-minute episodes as well too. So I want to continue to think about where this could take me. And then, the third answer is kind of a fill in the blank. Just enjoy life more. I like to travel. I love a good cruise. My wife and I have been on a dozen cruises, seeing different parts of the world, being able to explore both the U.S. and other parts of the world a little bit more are definitely on my bucket list.
Thank you so much, Tony, for sharing your journey and insights with us. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Well, this episode wraps season 3 of the podcast, and it's close to our 1-year anniversary. I'd like to thank my season 3 guests, our recruiter, Michelle, our mental health therapist, Leanne, our HR executive, Chanel, our true crime podcast host, Celicia, our Dominican working mom, Lenice, and our new small business owner, Chris. And of course, a big thank you to our listeners. I really appreciate your support. I only have one ask: spread the word. We'd love to have new listeners join the podcast and hopefully benefit from the content. And please follow the podcast. This will help ensure our podcast is recommended to new listeners. And if you're wondering, the answer is yes, we will be back for season 4 this summer. Oh, and at the beginning, I mentioned a special surprise. Well, maybe you figured it out, or maybe you didn't. Our guest host today, Alex, well, she was ChatGPT, AI at its finest. I'm curious, did you know, or are you surprised? Let me know in the podcast comments. Okay, that's a wrap. Thanks again all, and be safe. This is Tony Volpicello signing out.